Stop what you're doing right now, because if even half of what's being whispered behind the scenes turns out to be true, this could go down as one of the most jaw-dropping moves we've seen in recent NFL memory, and it involves the Dallas Cowboys, a former Heisman Trophy winner, and a deal that absolutely nobody saw coming but suddenly feels impossible to ignore. Because when a story like this starts gaining momentum, it's never random, it's never accidental, and it's usually a sign that something serious is brewing behind closed doors, and that's exactly what makes this situation so fascinating, so controversial, and so potentially league altering, because we're not talking about a fringe roster move or a low risk camp body here. We're talking about a player who once stood alone at the top of college football, a player who dominated an entire season so completely that voters had no choice but to hand him the most prestigious individual award the sport has to offer. And now, years later, that same name is being linked to America's team in what insiders are calling a shockingly aggressive but calculated move aimed squarely at winning right now. Not later, not eventually, but immediately. And when you really stop and think about where the Cowboys are as a franchise, this suddenly starts to make more sense than people want to admit, because Dallas is a team stuck in that dangerous middle ground, where they're too talented to rebuild, too expensive to wait, and too close to contention to sit on their hands, which means every season that ends without a deep playoff run only adds pressure, scrutiny, and urgency to the front office, to the coaching staff, and especially to the star players whose primes are ticking away in real time. And that urgency is what drives bold decisions, the kind of decisions that look insane on the surface, but reveal a deeper logic once you peel back the layers, because if you're the Cowboys, you're looking at a roster that already has recognizable names, established veterans, and proven production. But you're also looking at missed opportunities, stalled postseason performances, and that lingering narrative that this team shines bright in the regular season only to fade when the lights get hottest. And the quickest way to challenge that narrative isn't with patience. It's with disruption, with a move that forces opponents to adjust, analysts to rethink, and fans to ask uncomfortable questions. And bringing in a former Heisman winner does exactly that. Because whether people want to admit it or not, that label still carries weight. It still commands attention in meeting rooms and locker rooms. It still forces defensive coordinators to spend extra hours preparing for possibilities they didn't have to consider before. And from a psychological standpoint alone, that matters more than most fans realize, because football at this level isn't just about talent. It's about belief, momentum, and the confidence that comes from knowing your organization is willing to swing for the fences instead of playing it safe. And what's particularly interesting about these reports is the way they describe the structure of the potential deal, because this isn't being framed as a long-term commitment or a franchise-altering contract that could cripple the team financially. It's being whispered about as a short-term, incentive-heavy agreement designed to maximize upside while minimizing risk, the kind of deal that allows Dallas to say, we believe in what this player can still be, but we're not betting the future on it. And that distinction is critical because it shows that this isn't nostalgia driving the decision, it's opportunity. It's the recognition that sometimes players with elite pedigrees don't need to carry the entire load to be effective. They just need the right role, the right system, and the right timing. And Dallas might be one of the few teams positioned to offer exactly that. Because this roster doesn't require a savior, it requires a spark, someone who can tilt the field in key moments, someone who can be deployed selectively, creatively, and ruthlessly in situations where defenses are already stretched thin. And if you're wondering why this move is being discussed now instead of earlier in the offseason, that's another clue that something real might be happening, because late cycle moves like this usually come from internal evaluations, from watching film, from seeing how younger players develop, and from realizing that what you hoped would materialize organically might not be enough when January rolls around. And that's when front offices start making phone calls that fans never hear about until suddenly a rumor explodes out of nowhere. And the Cowboys are no strangers to this kind of controlled chaos, because despite their reputation for flash, they're often far more deliberate than people give them credit for, especially when it comes to protecting the salary cap and maintaining flexibility. And that's why the financial aspect of this potential deal is just as important as the football fit, because everything being floated suggests a contract built around performance triggers, snap counts, production milestones, and team success, which tells you that Dallas wants to be protected if the gamble doesn't pay off, but fully prepared to reap the rewards if it does. And that's exactly the type of structure you'd expect when dealing with a player whose past achievements are unquestioned, but whose future impact still needs to be proven. And beyond the X's and O's, there's the locker room dynamic, which is impossible to ignore, because adding a former Heisman winner sends a message not just to fans, but to the players already in that building. A message that says the front office believes this group is close enough to warrant extra investment, that the window is open now, and that complacency is not an option. And for veterans chasing a ring, that kind of move can be energizing rather than distracting, because it reinforces the idea that the organization is all in, that it's willing to do uncomfortable things to chase ultimate success. And of course, there will be skeptics. There always are people who will say this is about headlines, about selling jerseys, about chasing a name instead of production. And while those concerns shouldn't be dismissed outright, they also shouldn't overshadow the reality that the NFL has always been shaped by calculated risks, by teams willing to bet on talent, pedigree, and competitive fire, even when the odds aren't guaranteed. And history is filled with examples of moves that were laughed at initially only to be celebrated later when they paid off at the exact right moment. And what makes this particular situation so compelling is the mystery surrounding it. The fact that no official confirmation has surfaced, no definitive statements have been made, and yet the noise continues to grow, because silence from an organization like Dallas often speaks louder than denial. And every day that passes without this rumor being shut down outright only fuels the belief that conversations are happening, evaluations are ongoing, and contingency plans are being drawn up. And from a strategic standpoint, even the threat of this signing has value, because it keeps opponents guessing. It forces analysts to consider new scenarios, and it reminds the league that the Cowboys are not content with being predictable. And as we wait to see what actually happens, it's worth remembering that football careers are rarely linear, that development, decline, and resurgence don't follow neat timelines, and that sometimes the right opportunity arrives when expectations are lower but motivation is higher. And if this Heisman winner truly believes he has something left to prove, and if Dallas truly believes it can harness that motivation within a controlled framework, then what seems shocking today could look obvious in hindsight. And that's what makes this story so captivating, because it sits at the intersection of legacy, ambition, risk, and opportunity. And regardless of how it ultimately unfolds, it perfectly captures the tension that defines the modern NFL, where teams are constantly balancing patience with urgency, tradition with innovation, and caution with boldness. And if the Cowboys do pull the trigger on this deal, it won't just be about adding a player, it will be about making a statement, about signaling to the league and to themselves that they are done waiting for the perfect moment and ready to create one instead. And whether that gamble leads to glory or disappointment is something only time will tell. But one thing is certain: if this move becomes official, it will dominate conversations, headlines, and debates across the football world, because when a Heisman Trophy winner and